The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, I tell you most solemnly, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold through the gate, but gets in some other way, is a thief and a brigand. The one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the flock. The gatekeeper lets him in. The sheep hear his voice. One by one, he calls his own sheep and leads them out. When he has brought out his flock, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow because they know his voice. They never follow a stranger, but run away from him. They do not recognize the voice of strangers. Jesus told them this parable, but they failed to understand what he meant by telling it to them. So Jesus spoke to them again. I tell you most solemnly, I am the gate of the sheepfold. All others who have come are thieves and brigands, but the sheep took no notice of them. I am the gate. Anyone who enters through me will be safe. He will go freely in and out and be sure of finding pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come so that they may have life and have it to the full. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This fourth Sunday in Easter is known as Good Shepherd Sunday. And you know why? You've heard the psalm, you've heard the gospel reading. It's all about the Good Shepherd. And why are we reflecting on the Good Shepherd? Because this really is our connection with the Old and the New Testament, with what God was doing for his people and what God ultimately wants to do for us, his people. And this notion of the Good Shepherd, Jesus uses, and he turns in a whole other way. So the psalm was a psalm of David, and the psalm was a psalm of David when David was in a time of difficulty, and when David could not find the way to live as he would want to, when he had enemies on every side, when Saul was out to kill him, when he couldn't see how God could bring about the promise God had made to him, when he was anointed by Samuel. And God says to David, I am the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. And we know that psalm, that he allows us to lay down by green pastures, that even though we come to the valley of the darkness and death, no evil shall we fear. For his rod and his staff are there, and they lead and they guide. We know this psalm. And the psalm is a psalm of God's protection over his people. God's protection over David. And as David understood the way that God had shepherded him, David also understood the way that God called him to shepherd his people as a king. And so the psalm becomes this movement for David. Having experienced the providence of God, now David needs to give the same experience that he received from God. He needs to give that experience back to his people. So, Good Shepherd is first and foremost, in its earliest incarnation, it's really about the way that we can trust and put our hope in God. For 8 weeks, we've not been to Mass. It's 8 weeks, you know. Yeah, this is the 8th week. This is the 8th week. We're feeling it already. 8 weeks, we've not been out to Mass. And about 6 weeks, we've been locked down in our houses and shut away from everything. And we know the little microbe is wreaking havoc everywhere. But we also know that God is a good shepherd. A shepherd of our soul. And the real question is, in these 8 weeks, have we learned to trust the Good Shepherd? Or in these 8 weeks, have we become more fearful? more anxious, more worried, more feeling as if we're going to be stripped to pieces. What has the time done for us? And how have we responded to God in this time? You see, if God is a good shepherd, then there is nothing that I should fear. And that's a tough one. Because when we see what's happening in wider society, when we see what's happening in the Caribbean, when we see what's happening in the world economy, there is a lot of fear going around. And there's a lot of panic and a lot of anxiety that is happening. And that's why I believe that this text is coming to us exactly at the right time to remind us that God is in charge and God is here. And if God is here, there is nothing that I should fear. Nothing, nothing, nothing. To believe that with my life is to believe what David believed. And it's to come to what he came to as he became the shepherd of Israel, its king. To believe that with my life is to believe that in all the random circumstances of this world and this life and COVID-19 and the pandemic and the microbe and all the rest of it, there is nothing that I should fear. Nothing, nothing, nothing that I should fear. To believe that is to believe in a God who shepherds his people. And that's what Jesus is inviting us to. You see, the text that we have is right after the text of the man born blind, where the leaders of Israel had shown themselves to be bad shepherds. And what Jesus is contrasting here is the Psalm, the Good Shepherd, with Ezekiel 34, where he speaks about the bad shepherds, the shepherds who eat the fat of the rams and take all of the fleece of the rams and of the sheep and do not care for the sheep, allows them to get scattered and allows them to have heavy burdens and does not gather in the sheep. And so Jesus is contrasting the bad shepherds with him, the good shepherd. But in the text, he's also making a divine claim. Because the Psalm says, I am the good shepherd. And so does Jesus say, I am the good shepherd. It is Yahweh. It is the Lord God on high who is the good shepherd. And Jesus is claiming that he is the Lord God on high. He is the good shepherd. And here I want to move to a second understanding of good shepherd. Because the first has to do with our physical, bodily, worldly health. That we can trust God with that. But the truth of it is that we can only trust God with our external being if we understand the second understanding of the Good Shepherd, which is the internal sense of this teaching. That Jesus is the Good Shepherd, the shepherd of our soul. And he does lead us to restful pastures. You see, if we understand the text not only in terms of the external, but now in terms of the internal, what does that mean for us? Jesus says, I am the gate to the sheepfold. The image here is an image from his time where you would have a stone-walled place in the middle of the town where all the houses are around to stop people from getting to it. And there's one gate, and all the sheep go into this gate and into this little stone corral. And inside of there, when the door is locked, there's only one way in and there's only one way out. In baptism, many times when it's not in Mass, I would meet the families at the door of the church because Jesus is the gate through which we pass from death into life, from being no people at all into the family of God. He is the door through which we come into this family, into this community of church. And Jesus as the gate brings us in. But there's another sense in this, isn't there? That my soul, does my soul hear the voice of the shepherd? He says in the text that when the shepherd comes, his sheep recognize him. He calls them by name. He leads them out. They follow him. And these 4 characteristics, I want you to see in terms of you and your soul and Jesus and his leading. You see, for 10 weeks, for 8 weeks, we've had the opportunity of being shut down. There was a wonderful French cartoon that had this image of the whole big globe. And the globe is pointing a little finger, and then opposite it, you have a little human being standing in front of a house, and the world is saying, go back into your house and consider what you have done. Well, yeah, like a parent, a teenage child. Go and consider what you... We have had 8 weeks to consider what we have done, to consider what we have done to the earth, what we have done to each other, what we have done to humanity, what we have done in our choices, what we have done in our lifestyle, what we have done by the way that we have lived our life, what we have done, and the havoc that we have created on society. We have had 8 weeks to consider. Have we really used this time to consider? Because here's the thing. It is a good shepherd speaking to the soul that allows the soul to recognize his voice, to know that they're called by name, to follow him, and to be on the path that he is calling. The good shepherd of the soul is speaking about prayer and our union with God, our union with Christ, our capacity to listen, to hear, to be called, and to follow. Are you in this place where God can call and you will follow? Because humanity before COVID-19 was heading along a path of destruction that was so terrible. We were going, every indication was so terrible. The number of people in migration, the number of people in slavery, the earth and what we were doing to the planet, our own lives and health, our lifestyles that didn't care about the poor and care about those who were on the fringe of society. There's so many things that we just got so busy with that we forgot some of the things that were more important. Like the time to listen to God, the time to allow God to speak to your soul. When last have you had a moment of silence, allowed God to speak to your soul? Because the only way that we would have this sense of a good shepherd through these next 2 years that we will live, or year and a half until a vaccine comes, the only way that we will have the sense that the good shepherd will care for me and I do not need to worry is if you are in touch with the good shepherd in your soul, and if you have this communion with the good shepherd, and in your soul you know that all is well with my soul, because all is well with me and God. And it is that he's inviting us today. To strengthen that relationship between us and the Good Shepherd in a relationship of prayer. The sheep recognize the shepherd. They know his voice. They are led out when he calls, and they follow him. And that's how the soul is to respond to Jesus, the Good Shepherd. And when we don't, we do the opposite. We do not recognize him. We do not recognize his voice. We do not follow him and be led out. And we are not following him, and therefore we are going in our own way and in our own direction. The role of the Good Shepherd is together with the role of the Holy Spirit. Because it is the Spirit that teaches us how to follow like the Good Shepherd, and how to listen to his voice, how to be obedient to what God is asking of us. There are many people that God is calling, who are not responding to that call. Because you know, every single one of us is called by God. Every one of us. And if we would listen to his voice, if we would recognize his voice, listen and know his voice, go out when we are called and follow him. If we would do this, if every Christian in the world did this, this whole world would be a very different place. A very different place. We've had an amazing experience in these days. The level of generosity of people is overwhelming. Your response to listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd, to care that we can be good shepherds for those who have nothing, and your generosity in caring, in bringing hampers, in bringing food, in providing things, in making things happen, that generosity has been absolutely overwhelming. And this is an incredible response to the Good Shepherd, that we must become good shepherds for the people who do not have what they need. And that's how God is a good shepherd to them, by animating you and me to respond to what he's asking of us. The whole of the spiritual life, comes down to this, that we must know the Good Shepherd. We must recognize his voice. That we must hear him calling us by name and know it is him. That when he calls us out, we are led out with him. And we follow him wherever he asks. That is a core of vocation. And baptism brings us to vocation. Vocation, vocare, is to be called, and to be called out from, to be called to. And these are all the actions of the Good Shepherd in our text today. Every single one of us. If you're married, that's your vocation. And you're called to your spouse in a way of love that is laying down your life. And that means that you forgive and forgive and forgive again. And you become good shepherd to your spouse as your spouse becomes good shepherd to you. As you all are good shepherds to your children, your grandchildren, your family. This is a call. But this call can only happen. And the church can only become incredibly alive again when every single one of us has this relationship with the Good Shepherd, and where we're spending time where we are listening to his voice. Because the noise is real, and whenever we are let back out, we might well go back out and forget what we have learned. And I'm asking in these days, while we still have time of slowness and time where we are confined, I'm asking that in these days, spend quiet time with him. Listen to his voice. Allow his voice to lead you where he wants you to go, and become that sheep that follows his voice no matter where he leads you. The ultimate call of the Good Shepherd is to heaven. This is the ultimate call. When we allow our soul to be led by him, then our body, we're not worried about what happens, because we are so in our relationship with him that we know that whatever happens externally, that he is our good shepherd. And when those two happen, then we need not fear death. We need not fear death, because we know that death has no sting and no power, because the Good Shepherd is the gate through which we will leave this earth and enter into heaven itself. Because he is the gate and there is no other gate. The thief comes to steal and to destroy and to kill. But he comes that we may have life and have it in abundance. And this abundance of life that he's called us to is both here on earth, but also our world in heaven. God is calling you. He's calling you to something. Something that you're not hearing because you've been too busy. Something that you're not hearing because your life has been too filled. Something that you're not hearing because you've been too anxious and worried. Something that you're not hearing because you have not yet learned to recognize the voice of the Good Shepherd. But God is calling you. And there are many people who are being called to vocation. To the vocation of priesthood, of religious life, and of the lay consecrated life. There are many people who are being called. and you cannot hear because of fear. You cannot hear because you are not allowing God to speak to your soul. You're not allowing the Good Shepherd to shepherd your soul into that place where you can trust him and where when he calls, you will follow. If you're feeling a tug in your life, you're feeling a tug in your soul to serve God in a way that is terrifying you right now, don't be terrified and run. Go into him and spend some time and listen. And when you listen to him, listen again. And listen again, and allow him to calm your soul till you can hear that call and answer and respond, because it is in that he will lead you to where you will go. And it is when we are living our vocation fully that God can use us to be good shepherds to all of his people, to ensure that his people are receiving the care that they need in this world. On this Good Shepherd Sunday, every one of us has a vocation. And many of us have got waylaid in our vocation because of the noise of our lifestyle, the choices that we have made, the 7 deadly sins that have become so alluring to us. And that's the thief that destroys. Let us allow that to go to the side for the moment. Let's come to him. Whatever your vocation is, come to him today. And spend some time in quiet today. Listen to his voice and let him settle your soul. And then you might be able to sing, all is well with my soul indeed. All is well with my soul. Because when we are listening to him, when we are in communion with him, when we allow our life to be led by him, that is when all is well with our soul. And that is when we have no need for fear. That is when whatever rages around us, we know that the Good Shepherd will take care of us, not only in our physical life here on earth, but ultimately, in bringing us into his heaven and bringing us through the gate which is him, to the Father's house, where he'll say to us, be pleased with you. Come into my Father's house. Come and rest for a while with me. Let us listen to the Good Shepherd, and let us answer the call that he's giving to us today. Amen.